So let's come back to what we're here to talk about, the Scottish Constitution. The Scottish Constitution developed out of that social, political influence. The Gaeltacht was across more than 90% of Scotland. I mean, right up to the 1900s. And out of that, we got two principles. The sovereignty of the Scottish people, which you see in the Declaration of the Clergy and the Declaration of Arbroath. It's then reenacted in statutes from that time all the way up to the Claim of Right in 1689. And the second provision, which was the primacy of the common good. We have been colonized. We have a constitution. The uncodified English constitution is extracted out of their historical documents. Nobody has done that for Scotland. Nobody's even looked at our public records, our parliamentary records, to see what our constitution says. But if the record has been damaged and partially lost, something that happened in 1689 was that in order to depose a government, please bear in mind, people will say, well, it's a king. They wanted to get rid of a king. In Scotland, the king had not abdicated. They had to depose him. If they'd had to depose the monarch in England, at that point, before Parliament was sovereign, they'd have had to depose themselves too. Scotland had a constitutional provision called the Convention of the Estates. So we had a parliament that developed from the King's Council, as it did in all European countries. We had something Scottish, developed out of the Guardians of the Realm, became the Greater Council of Scotland, and then the Convention of the Estates, which means the Assembly of the Peoples. That had been, you've no idea how many times that was called, but it wasn't a sitting body. It was called as needed. It's a constitutional provision in Scotland. That had the power to sack a government under certain conditions. Should that government violate the compact, which in the Claim of Right is described as the fundamental constitution of Scotland, the only statutory document that talks about a fundamental constitution in the history of the United Kingdom. And in the 1600s, fundamental wasn't used the way we used it. Oh, that's a fundamental part of life. No, it meant the foundation. The foundation of Scotland is its constitution, says the Claim of Right. What does it say? It says that there are legitimate ends for government. That means that there are things a government can do that make it illegitimate. The legitimate ends of government is not to do what this king with his parliament has done. And then it spells them out. It spells out two things. All the things which are protected come under the common good, the things we're entitled to. And they reflect how Scots feel. It's amazing. Privilege is a dirty word in this constitution. It should be a dirty word today. Privilege means private law. Private law. You've no idea how many laws Scotland passed to ensure that everybody, from the king to the cooper, had the same access to justice and was subject to exactly the same justice. Exactly the same. William the Orange couldn't believe it after he got them to carry out the Glencoe massacre, that Scotland was getting ready to put him on trial, a king. But they were getting ready to summon him to appear in court. That's why he offered them Darien, but that's another story. Everybody under our constitution, everybody, Boris Johnson, Her Majesty the Queen, Rishi Sunak, whoever you like, Dross, they're all subject, and by the way, all our MSPs. Subject to exactly the same law. And fortunately for us, the provisions, the things they cannot violate, are set out in the Claim of Right. Are those who are looking to write a new constitution going to put in the sovereignty of the Scottish people the way it is in a constitution that took over 1,000 years to develop? 1,000 years. Are they going to respect the identity of the Scottish nation for whom they are writing this constitution? Are they going to honour the nature, the character, the soul of a people who said, we're all Jack Tamson's bairns, or whose bard wrote, a man's a man for all that? Is that going to be in the constitution? Are they going to be happy, those on high, who get together in their little groups to write a constitution, to ensure that a constitutional provision, which includes this ombudsman, this tribunal, which represents the people who lend their power to government, only lend it. You can't transfer popular sovereignty to a parliament or it becomes parliamentary sovereignty, just like Westminster's. And that's nothing but an elected dictatorship. If all you get to do is vote, that's not democracy.
Yeah.
So are they looking at Scotland's ancient, powerful and modern constitutional provisions and making sure they're there? You know what? I don't think so. I welcome, embrace and celebrate all new Scots with all my heart, but I do not blame new Scots for feeling that there's no real importance about, we're going to have a new Scotland. Let's not bother with the past. We will not heal from 300 years of vicious, tyrannical oppression, of blood and pain and suffering and famine and desperation and being driven out of our land by saying, let's have a new Scotland. It's not going to do anything for us. Healing comes from being given back what's ours. And that's a scary thing. And that's a very scary thing for those who've got used to the greasy pole of the Norman feudal system that is now falling apart and running rampant across the political scene. What? Be answerable to the people. Be answerable to the unwashed masses. Oh my God. Aye, you will be. And here's why. Here's the last piece of this puzzle. We have suffered so much and so hard and so long. And there's not an old Scot that doesn't have a story. My grandmother, not allowed to learn Gaelic. My grandmother on my father's side, miner's daughter. Hear their stories. Nobody, our relatives in Australia, our relatives in Canada, none of us, none of the old Scots, who are no more Scots than the new Scots, but we're the old Scots, don't have this story. And a colonised nation has problems that are almost like the problems of an individual who's gone through serious abuse. There's drug dependency, alcoholism, high suicide rates, hopelessness. It's the picture of Native Americans, Aboriginals in Australia, and Scots and Irish before the independence. That is the picture of a colonised nation. If you look at South Africa, what happened after independence, what happened after they got rid of that system? The brilliance of Nelson Mandela was to have peace and reconciliation, heal. So we're angry now. We can't stay angry once we're free. We need to heal. The Constitution of Scotland is a way of healing because it sets out a journey that we made, which expresses the compact between people and power and which was taken from us. It'll do two things. One, it is uniting people across Scotland. It's moving so fast I can't keep up with it. It's taking my breath because we've known and we've missed it and we wanted it. It gives us a route. You know, what Elliot was talking about, when we have independence and through the referendum. So I have a wee thing I was going to say. I'm sorry I'm a wee bit late, but I'm going to read this anyway. So here's my message to all those who are talking about, with all the best will in the world, who have no vested interest in an ancient Scottish constitution because they're New Scots, or they're identifying with New Scots. I understand that. To all of those going, what we need to persuade everybody to vote this way in the referendum, bring over the soft vote, convince people. I have, as I said before, I have a question for you. Do you also believe in a flat earth? Because the scientific evidence is in. Where is this? I told you I'd have to check my notes. So, this is my message. Any route to independence that depends on the honour of the old boys, or the new boys in the British establishment, an establishment that has shown itself repeatedly and consistently to be willing to act in the most dishonourable and despicable ways in its own interest, that depends on fairness from a state that has shown and continues to show utter contempt for the principles of justice, that depends on adherence to law or binding agreement of what has become a rogue state, presently in violation of both international and domestic law, and I give you the EU Withdrawal Bill and the Northern Ireland Protocol. In short, any route to independence that depends on, in any way whatever, on the honour, fair dealing and dispassionate observance of law by a state whose right to make, break, alter or ignore any law or any treaty whatsoever in its own interests is enshrined, and whose rights is enshrined in the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, is a dead end. The bottom line is simple. They will not let Scotland go. There are no circumstances in which Scotland can negotiate with the British state for independence and actually achieve it. And we have to stop the wishful self-delusion that such a route was ever on the cards. So we have to leave. And the way that we leave is to reinstate, through a mass civil movement, international recognition of the fact that we have an international treaty with a binding condition. The binding condition is that we have a constitution, and that constitution is supposed to be in place in Scotland. We can use that constitution to get the independence that I'm afraid Elliot's route through a referendum it's a complete nonsense to imagine it will achieve it. We can achieve it that way. We can achieve it with the whole of Scotland together and behind it, and we will get that. We will get that. And when we do, we start. We've already got the basis. We can start working on it now, turning what the provisions are in the Claim of Right into modern language so that everybody knows what they are. We've got the start, and we'll never let go of popular sovereignty that way. We get real political reform that way. We get the people upholding the common good that is so desperately needed that way. And we get independence that way. And that is both our route to freedom, our route to political change, and our route to healing from 300 years of abuse.